Welcome back to the Explainer. Before you can even think about fine-tuning a large language model, you've got to power it up and get it initialized just right. So today, we're diving deep into this absolutely critical step, the one that really sets the foundation for the entire mission. All right, so as you can see, fine-tuning isn't just one thing. It's this whole 7-stage mission. Today, we're zooming in on stage 2, Model Initialization. And it's so important to see where this fits in the grand scheme of things. Think of it like this. It's the pre-flight check. You wouldn't launch a rocket without it, right? Same deal here. It's what makes sure our mission even has a shot at success.
Okay, so here's the thing you've got to get. Initialization isn't just flipping a switch and hoping for the best. Nope, it's more like a carefully choreographed dance, a sequence of steps where each one builds on the last, all to get the model perfectly prepped for whatever you're going to throw at it.
And here it is, the complete blueprint for that power-up sequence. We are literally going to walk through this entire flowchart together, step by step. We'll start with prepping the digital workspace and go all the way to watching the model execute its very first commands.
So this first phase, it's all about setting up your digital workshop. First, you've got to get your environment ready. That means configuring your hardware, like your GPUs or TPUs, to really squeeze out every bit of speed. Then, you move on to installing all the software you need, the dependencies, and importing the right code libraries. And finally, the big decision. You choose the perfect pre-trained language model that's going to be the heart and soul of your project.
Okay, so once that foundation is solid, it's time to bring the model online. This is where you actually go and download it, usually from a place like Hugging Face. Then comes the really cool part. You load its massive network of parameters into your system's memory. It's only after all that it's finally ready to start doing its thing. Generating text, making predictions, whatever you need.
Now, you can't build something this complex without the right tools, right? Powering up an LLM takes a pretty specialized toolkit. So, let's take a look at the heavy hitters, the industry-standard software that makes all of this possible.
All right, these three, they are the absolute titans of the AI world. First up, Hugging Face Transformers. This is basically your all-access pass to thousands of pre-trained models. It makes getting started incredibly easy. Now, when it's time to actually build and tweak the model, you're probably looking at one of two options. PyTorch, which is super flexible and a favorite in the research community, or TensorFlow, which is a beast when it comes to scaling things up for big, real-world deployments. But what happens when things go wrong? Because they sometimes do. A successful mission isn't just about having a perfect plan. It's about being ready for the unexpected. A really smooth initialization means you've already thought about what could fail before it actually does.
So, how should we think about these problems? Well, instead of just seeing them as random, frustrating bugs, it's way more helpful to think of them as predictable system alerts. Kind of like the check engine light in your car. They're warnings you can actually plan for and deal with ahead of time.
Okay, this table breaks down the most common alerts you'll see. First up, resource constraints. This one's simple. A model like Llama 3.8b, for example, needs at least 16 gigs of GPU memory just to get going. If you don't have it, initialization will just fail flat out or crawl at a snail's pace. Then there's model task misalignment. This is a big one. Imagine trying to use a model trained on Shakespearean poetry to analyze financial reports. Yeah, that's not going to work well. It's a recipe for poor performance. We also have to talk about bias awareness. Remember, these models are trained on real-world data, and that data can have biases. If you're not aware of that from the start, you could end up with some pretty skewed or unfair results later on. And finally, model size. Sometimes the model is just too big for your setup. A great workaround here is to use a quantized version. You can think of it like compressing a giant photo. You might lose a tiny bit of quality, but it suddenly becomes way easier to handle.
So, when you step back and look at the big picture, how does this all fit together? Well, every single thing we've talked about, from picking the right tools to keeping an eye out for those system alerts, it's all about one thing: building a rock-solid foundation for success. This stage is what makes everything that comes after it even possible.
And really, it all boils down to this. Getting the initialization stage right is completely non-negotiable. The source material puts it perfectly. It's the crucial process of setting up the model's initial parameters and configuration. When you do it right, you're ensuring the model will train efficiently, perform at its best, and steer clear of those common problems later. It is, without a doubt, the launchpad for a successful fine-tuning mission. All right, so our model is powered up, initialized, and ready to go. So, what's next? What's the next step in our mission? Well, in the next chapter, we're going to get into setting up the training environment itself. So if you want to stay with the squad and see this through, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it.